Hello, everybody, and welcome to That Real Texas Team podcast, where we're going to be talking nothing but Texans the entire time. So, with me tonight, James Roy at N1 Texans fan on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram. If there's a social, that's what it is. James Roy, fellow Texans YouTuber. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing good. How are you doing, Curtis?
Doing well, man. Doing well.
All
Feel like
right.
I just saw you not too long ago.
I feel that too.
We just wrapped up a live stream on his channel, and then now he's come on over to do mine. So please go check that out. Subscribe to his channel. Trying to pump his numbers up. He's up over me, but still. Uh,
Rookie numbers got to pump up those numbers.
you guys, what I'm saying. But yeah, so we're gonna be getting into all sorts of free agency discussions and kind of figure out what need to be addressed in free agency still or in the draft. So leading off, Derek Barnett returns, Charlie Heck is back, Chris Boyd and Steven Sims Jr. all returning. Which one of those moves you think is the biggest or the best move, even though they're all not necessarily the most flashy?
I have to say 100% it's Derek Barnett. I think that with the sacks and just the general uh you know what he contributed to the Texans in his reserve role and stepping up during some injuries, I think that the Texans got, you know, I think as much as they thought they would out of him when they picked him up on waivers from the Eagles, a first round talent that was certainly meant to be a long-term Eagles player. And I mean, I think that it's great that they got him on another 1 year deal. Give him another look. That's pretty much Nick's mo, is bringing in a player on a 1 year deal, and then sending them somewhere else after they've proven themselves. So, I mean, I think that's major. I've been saying that since the end of the season that they needed to work out something with Derek Barnett.
So it's almost like Casario and the Texans are like a rehabilitation center for football players. Uh,
Yeah, I mean that's how you do it. You find the talent from players that maybe, I don't know, you don't give them like the huge deal and risk having them under contract for a long time without getting anything from them. So that's why the Joe Mixon extension kind of shocked me a little bit there. But I mean, it's in the Texans' mo to just do 1 year deals, and
oh,
and I don't think we'll see that go down a lot as we
yeah.
move forward.
The only other person I've known Casario to do that with is Shaq Mason, who he gave an extension to before he even played it down. So
Yeah,
also
you got to have some
off
certainty.
trade. Yeah. Um, Folo Fadakasi's deal is official. It took a little bit. It wasn't on like a lot of the free agent pages for a while because I think he was just trying to see if anybody was going to meet or match an offer. But the big man comes over to Houston, not necessarily filling a role entirely, but filling a spot temporarily, I feel. Fodakasi did not have a great season last year, and he has a lot of injury issues, but he is a big man, that he is. And he's a good interior, probably 1-2 technique. Um, his big thing for us is going to be eat up blocks and stop the run. Um,
100%.
how are you feeling about him?
I think it's a solid pickup. You could view it as depth. You could view it as a start. I mean, with the defensive line and the way that snaps are distributed, I'm not going to sit here and get mad that we didn't get the flashy signing, because even the flashy signing will take downs off when you play in the defensive line. The amount of defensive linemen that play 100% every snap, every game is not an incredibly high number. So, I mean, I'm good with whatever the Texans decide to do in there. I think that as it stands, we can say that the defensive line is, unless they want to address it further in the draft, is good where it's at. I think we'll probably see them. And I spoke to you about this earlier. The Danico Autry's flexibility is going to be a huge piece for them. The way that he pass rushes from the middle of the defensive line is going to be something to look out for, because they could he could see a lot of third down interior work.
Yeah. I mean, he was a monster the last 2 or 3 years in Tennessee. Um, Last year was his best season in a while. I think it was 11 and a half sacks. Pretty solid year for the old man. I think he's going to be 34 at some point in the next season. So it's basically like we lost Jerry Hughes, brought in Danico Autry. Same, same. You know what I mean? I mean, they're different types of players, but veteran leadership, rotational big men. Um, Mario Edwards Jr. also enters the fold after having a pretty good season with the Titans. I believe it was last year, year before. Signing a decent 1 year deal with Tampa, I think. I don't know where he's been, but now he's back with us. He actually started his career with us, if not mistaken, way back in the day. Um, he's kind of like Danico Autry in the fact that he's a bigger guy and has positional versatility. He could be an interior guy for us, and if enough injuries happened, he could be an edge guy. That's kind of how he was used in Tennessee. Same with Danico. Just kind of depends on what they're going for at the time. But how are you feeling about Mario Edwards Jr.?
I mean, I'd group him into the same category as like most players that fit his description, which is that when the news broke on Twitter, I'm scrolling and I see him in a Seahawks uniform, a Titans uniform. Like I see him in all these different uniforms. He's just a journeyman defensive lineman. Probably make the roster as far as I can tell. Um, but maybe he doesn't. So I don't know what they see from him or how they see him fitting, but I'm not putting too much stock in it at the moment. I mean, I'd like to see him contribute in a useful way, but I don't really have too much to say about it.
Okay. Um, we talked about this a little bit on your show, but Damian Pierce, there's been rumors that the Dallas Cowboys, who don't even have a running back on the roster other than Deuce Vaughn, um, are shopping around, and Damian Pierce is alleged to be one of the people that they're interested in. Um, how would you feel if he leaves in a trade to Dallas?
Well, like I said earlier, I mean, fifth round pick is what I'd suspect is the value at which the Texans go. Oh, maybe we should just move on from him. I'd say I, it depends on who you ask, right? I think in general, a lot of the rivalry between the Texans and the Cowboys comes from the Texans side. So I feel like a lot of Texans fans would not like that. I mean, from my perspective personally, I mean, I love beating the Cowboys. I think that the Texans are clearly the better team in Texas right now, but with how few times the Texans play the Cowboys in general, it's just it's hard for me to be understanding that the Texans, I believe, do play the Cowboys this season. I mean, it'd be one of those revenge games for Pierce, you know, if he wants it to be, if he manages to carve out a role. But I can't say I'd be super mad to see him go as long as the compensation's good. If they send him over there for like a seventh round pick and a bag of chips, then like yeah, I'd be probably a little frustrated. The Texans have two running backs in their room right now after signing Joe Mixon, so the urgency to move on from Damian Pierce just isn't there.
No. Um, After the Joe Mixon trade was finalized, we saw the announcement that they gave him a 3 year, $27 million extension. Now, prior to the announcement of this, there was rumors circulating that the reason that they traded for him was so he didn't hit the free agent market and they get outbid. And then they give him $9 million. um, I, I find that to be quite a skeptical thought when you consider the amount of money we gave him. Because what Derrick Henry's only at 8.
Well, I mean, when you look at I would say this: the Texans, 100%, you can still believe that they made that trade to avoid him hitting the open market, with the understanding that the Ravens, I think, were always final destination for Derrick Henry. So the Texans could have pulled him away with more money, but it would have been about as much as they ended up paying Joe Mixon, and they got to control the terms of the contract instead of, or I guess they either way they would have, but instead of it being a negotiation, it was more of a okay, we've acquired you, and now let's work out an extension. And I think that's a different vibe because in the at the end of the day, if the Texans trade for a seventh round pick for Joe Mixon, and then he doesn't want to sign an extension or that he doesn't think they're treating him seriously, then it becomes the same thing that we talked about before, which is that Nick Casillas is giving him a prove it deal. And so now Joe Mixon has 1 year left on his contract. He plays it out. If he plays really well, he'll sign a bigger contract elsewhere. But the Texans obviously had a number in mind to offer him to lock him down for longer, and he liked that number. So I mean, I don't see any problem with it. I don't think it lessens the goodness of that deal, and I don't think it's a huge issue that they decided to give him more money. I reckon they probably traded for him so that they could have more conversation talks. Like I said, in goodwill, understanding that Mixon's already under contract as a Texan, and this is
Yeah,
extension talks. It's not a new contract that we're competing with other teams, right? That
right.
running back market was thin when the Texans made that move. So if Mixon hits the open market, it's tough.
Yeah. That's fair. That's a fair point. Um, the fan base is a little divided on free agency, at least to you know, 30 to 70%. Like 30%, they're like Casario is making terrible moves. 70% are loving the moves. Where do you fall?
I mean, I I think that a lot of the frustration with Casario comes from this place of and Casario, to his credit, made his splash. He signed Daniil Hunter. He went out, got Aziz Al-Shaair. He made some moves that cost like a significant. It's not like we're sitting here, the beginning of free agency, somewhere in the upper 60s, probably I will say 68 million cap space. The Texans, as it stands, as from what we know, are sitting at 20 million in cap space. So it's not like Nick didn't spend any of the cap space. And when you look at what he acquired, you understand how NFL rosters are built and that you can't sign, it's not Madden, you can't sign 99 overall players to every position,
Right.
extend them all the way out to a 7 year contract to push that, right? Like I don't know.
Yeah.
That's how when I played Madden franchise mode, you just throw a 7 year contract out there, and then it doesn't matter how much money you throw because this is real life. So Nick had to
Right.
work against a very real salary cap, and he did a good job. He met a lot of the Texans' needs, and I think that anyone who is saying that the Texans didn't have a good free agency doesn't understand how good of a position the team is in outside of veteran safety, right, through the rest of free agency. The Texans are in a very good position in the draft to add very useful talent to this team to fill whatever needs remain, which is honestly not a huge amount.
Yeah. Um, one of the latest free agent signings, not latest, I guess he was announced after a lot of the big moves, but Tommy Townsend, former Kansas City Chiefs punter, is now the Texans punter. Cameron Johnston leaves. Cameron Johnston averaged like 80 punts a year while he was with Houston, which is a lot.
A
The
good
man had,
tryout for other teams, I guess. I don't know.
yeah, he was like, "Can I go somewhere else where they're not going to use me so much? I'm tired, bro." But then you look at Tommy Townsend, who averages 50.25 a season. He's just not. He's at the kind of reps where Cameron Johnston's like, yeah, man, that sounds nice. um, I think Tommy Townsend's got a one hell of a leg on him. I think he's going to be. I think he's going to be one of those punters that we keep around for a while. It's kind of like when Shane Leckler showed up. We just kept him until he retired. I
Yeah.
think it was like a good 4 or 5, 6 years. I hope we do the exact same thing with Tommy Townsend, and he's kind of young. I don't want him going anywhere.
Yeah, and so Tommy 2 years ago was like top five in average punt distance, average placement, average opposing starting position, I believe is the stat, and Cam Johnston was like 16, and then they kind of switched positions last season. So Tommy Townsend was very average, and I think that they're hoping Frank Ross can bring out that top five punter in him, and rightfully so. I mean, Frank Ross is a great special teams coordinator. I mean, when I look at the situation that Cam Johnston has signed himself up for, it certainly had to be because the money was there, because he's going to be working for it. I
Yeah,
mean, Russell Wilson, great deal for the Steelers, paying 1.5 million, I believe, or 1.2, some
yeah,
obscenely low, basically veteran minimum number for Russell Wilson, and then trading for Justin Fields, who I'm very outspoken in saying is just not a very good quarterback.
at all.
So I mean I think that Cam Johnston is walking into a situation where we'll see him maintain his average. He'll be punting quite a bit if I know anything about football, which depends on who you ask as to whether or not that's true. But the signing of Tommy Townsend's great. I think that the Texans special teams unit has performed well under Frank Ross, who is, I believe, the only coach that has survived all the years that the Texans absolutely sucked. And for a good reason, the Texans special teams, even during those times, were good.
Yeah,
So I mean, I'm glad that they are giving him the tools he needs to continue being a great special teams coordinator.
yeah. And I think a lot of the moves that we've made so far have been specifically to keep Frank Ross happy. Steven Sims, Boyd, more of a special teams guy. Um, yeah, so I think we're
They're
just trying to keep the man happy.
they're
I
roster moves,
Yeah, the Ross.
like you said.
Yeah. Um, let's mention the uniform. I wasn't going to talk about it at all until we talked about it on your show. Um, how mm, how do I ask this question? I
Up to you.
I know. I'm just um how do you feel about it? How are you feeling about the jerseys? Do you think that the all red jersey is going to be kind of a weird matte color?
I'm hoping they go. So this past season, about or what was it? Battle Red never looked so good as it did in the pictures leading up to the All Red game. Whereas like brighter, kind of like how the Panthers like all blue uniforms kind of got that brighter blue, and
Yeah,
more like I don't know if they just like turned up the not exposure. What's the term in I don't know in color in photo corrections.
hue.
Not hue. I don't know. I lost track of it there for a second. Saturation. There we go. Saturation, brightness. I don't know how you'd say it, but I liked it when they looked like that. I don't feel like they looked like that on the field, but I'm hopeful that that's the shade of battle red, if you will, that they'll go with. Like I said earlier, I mean, all of the uniforms are expected to be in some way different. We're not expecting to see the same uniform in different colors. So I'd be prepared to see. I mean, I think one detail that might remain consistent is the horns on the shoulder, but even then, that could be just an away uniform thing. Like from what I read, like I don't know if it's not something that they put out that it was easy to understand. It's just kind of reading between the lines kind of stuff. But as far as uniforms go, I love them. I think they look great. Anyone who's making there's a how I know the uniforms are good is that there's a very vocal minority that's kind of making people believe that a lot of people didn't like them, and but if you're looking for it, you'll find people that don't like anything. And I think in general, the uniforms are a huge hit with the majority of the fan base, and so the Texans, I think, knew going into this they weren't going to please everyone, but they did their best, and I think they did a pretty good job. So I'm excited to see the rest of them.
What's one player you wouldn't mind getting in the new jersey?
I mean, obviously CJ Stroud is a player that I'm gonna have to get the jersey in, but if you want me to pick a not obvious answer, what's that one Pop Tart bit, that sound that goes around on TikTok where it's like, oh, I like a strawberry Pop Tart. It's like, what a basic answer. Like, give me something
Yeah.
better. I'm like, okay, well, I'll get okay. We'll go with man. Now I have to really dig deep. Now I set it up. Um, good grief. I'll go with Will Anderson, which I know may or may not actually be a deep dig, but no, actually, you know what? Christian Harris. That's my deep dig is Christian Harris because
Yeah.
I like the energy he's bringing to that defense. He is the first of many examples we'll get of a D'Amico Ryan's protege. So that's what I'll go with.
All off season, last off season, I was hoping and praying that Christian Harris would take steps with D'Amico Ryan's. Played
Probably
phenomenally
took more
down the
steps than
stretch.
you thought he would.
Oh my god. The game against the Titans will live in my head forever because he was all over Derrick Henry.
You know
Uh,
when I knew that I was gonna love Christian Harris? It was in
when
the Steelers game, and George Pickens was like just moaning and complaining to the refs about a call, and Christian Harris stands next to him and just like emotes like tears, like, and I was like, oh, dude, get in his head.
plus 5.
That's like Draymond Green like type get in your head kind of stuff that I like to see,
Yeah,
especially when it's happening from a player on my team.
yeah. If I had to pick somebody, obviously CJ would be one of them. Non quarterback jerseys would probably be. Who do I have a lot of faith in? Probably Tank Dell.
Yeah, that was one that I thought of too.
Yeah, I think that would be the move because because he's definitely going to be here for a couple more years. Everybody else, Nico's got a contract extension that could be or could not be, so a little up in the air. I wouldn't mind getting a Nico jersey, but here's my controversial question of the evening.
Uh-oh.
Do you have trust in Titus Howard to regain his 2022 form after being asked to play out of position all season last year and not playing well?
Well, I mean, I'll tell you this. I've said it once. I said it 1,000 times. I'll say it again. I'll say it till my breath runs out. The starting five on this Texans offensive line is on the roster right now, and the only position that's questionable to me is left guard. It's a stance that I'll stand firm on until proven wrong or until proven right. So, I mean, the hope is that Kenyon Green can figure it out, and I think that that's the sentiment that's being expressed by a lot of people around the Texans is that they think that if he gets this full offseason program and is healthy, that he'll play up, and he's supposed to be a mauler, a run blocker, which would really help solve, I don't know, the problem that the Texans offensive line had with run blocking.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
yeah, I mean, they were solid at pass blocking, and when Titus Howard is at right tackle, he looked good. Is his health concerning? Of course it is. He's been injured for a lot of his career, but is he really good when he plays? Yeah. So I think that asking him to play out of position and just I don't know. I think that took its toll. But and he's never been. I don't know if he'll tell you this, but I mean I'll tell you that he's 100% just not a left guard.
No.
He's capable of it in a sense that when the team needed him, they believed he was their best option. But I really was wishing that Kendrick Green would have stayed healthy. Uh, who, by the
Yeah.
way, the Steelers just traded the pick the Texans gave them to get Justin Fields. So the Texans gave the Steelers the pick for Kendrick Green that was used conditionally to acquire Justin Fields from the Bears. But I don't have any reason to doubt Titus Howard's skill level. So I'm hopeful he goes out on their field and shows that he is. What's that one quote from the Cardinals coach Dennis? What's his face?
We
They
are
are
who we
who
thought
we
they were.
thought they were.
Yeah.
Like, I'm
We got
hoping
him
we
off the
find
hook.
out that Titus Howard is who we thought he was.
Yeah.
So
I bring it up because we paid him a lot of money. Believe it was, I don't think it was last offseason. It might have been the offseason before. Gave him like a 3-year extension. It was somewhere in the ballpark of like 17 million a season, what it averaged out to be.
that was this past offseason because that the talk
Okay.
was locking up the tackles to make sure that C.J. Stroud had protection.
Okay. This was this past offseason. Okay. So that happens. They bring in George Fant, who plays at the same tier that Titus Howard played at in 2022. Like they have comparable grades for as much faith as one can put in a grade these days. But um, I just feel like you didn't get a lot of the bang for the buck out of Titus Howard last season. And I made a bold prediction last offseason, and I'm going to make another one this year. So my bold prediction last offseason was predominantly angled at the Titans. That if they won, 4 games, 6 games, Mike Vrabel would get fired because they've already shown that they would move on from people they just signed to extensions if it didn't look like things were going in the right direction.
Interested
I
to
think
see
the
how that
same.
affects Calvin Ridley.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Talk about
Well,
cringe signing. But anyway.
yeah. Now that Vrabel's gone, they're a little less penny pinching. I feel like, but they also were kind of strapped with cash. Uh, or yeah. Anyway, I think Titus Howard kind of has to prove that he's worth the extension at this point because the first year of his, well, I don't know if last year was even the first year of it. This is the first year of the extension. Um, Now we need to see $17 million worth of tackle play. Otherwise, I think he could get moved on from pretty quickly.
I thought that George Fant would have been great to keep around, but I think a lot of Texans fans are gonna have to come to terms with the fact that unless the Texans draft, like, I can't remember his name, out of Texas, but there's a tackle out of Texas, that's kind of in that fourth or fifth round range, maybe third. I mean, they might go in the third. Who knows?
Yeah,
But unless they address tackle in the draft, like Charlie Heck is who you're expecting to start at right tackle when and if Titus Howard goes down. So I've come to terms with
correct.
that, but I think a lot of Texans fans are going to have to come to terms with that.
Yeah, I agree. And there was not really a lot of moves you could make in free agency this year to address that position. All the big free agents for offensive line were interior guys. So it's not like there was a whole lot of options. I mean, George Fant got paid a pretty penny to go be, I think, a backup in Seattle behind, I think, what's the Abraham Lucas, I think is the right tackle. And then
Yeah,
they got Charles Cross at left. So he's not even getting paid to go start. He'll end up being a backup unless somebody gets hurt. But
he's a high level backup. That's what I predicted. I was hoping
he
we'd
is.
bring him back to be a high level
Yeah.
backup for us.
I think that there's we I could see us making more moves to trade for people um, before the draft to kind of shore up some of those other things, so that maybe we're not using capital in the draft on players that we're reaching for
Yeah,
to fill that need. So, um,
would be nice.
yeah. Final question, and then we'll wrap this thing up. Um, Casario, famous for draft day trades. Um, what what is one trade you'd like to see him make?
A lot of people are talking about him. So we traded. Obviously, the Texans traded out of the first, picked up an extra 2025 second, and then picked up the Vikings second round pick, 42 overall. And a lot of people are talking about how they might be gearing up to make a move upwards if certain talent falls towards them. I don't mind that. I think with as much talent as is available on day two of this draft, that I might like to see the Texans, um, whether it's 42 or 59 or however they group it, if they could pick up an additional second or third round pick moving back, I think that puts them in the best position to address all the needs that they need to. Understanding that, I think at the end of the day, the Texans know that while it's nice to have that first round pick that's supposed to be kind of more of a sure thing, when it comes to getting a starter on this roster. I've said in the past that the Texans were, all but certain to get two starters from this draft, and I still believe that with the two second round picks because that's how deep the talent is. But I do think they can move back from one of those second round picks and still pick up another second and maybe a third or fourth. And I think that that would clean them out of their, seventh round picks, and then they can use the whatever seventh round pick they might have remaining or sixth, to move around in those rounds. I wouldn't suspect the Texans are trying to make a pick after the fifth round, personally.
Yeah. After the fifth round, Nick Casario just hangs up the phone, calls it a day.
No,
I
yeah.
could see that. Okay. Okay. Well, I think that's a pretty good place to stop. Um, so, James, I want to go ahead and thank you for coming on. Folks, I want you to go to his channel, James Roy at N1 Texans fan on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button, the notification bell, so you don't miss any of his future content, and hit the thumbs up on the live we just did. So, um, this has been episode 2 of that Real Texas Team podcast, not those boys with the star on their head. Um, so go Texans. Y'all be good people. Peace.